G'day, I'm Roland Hearn, and this is a walk in the garden. Well, welcome back. I'm still on the track, still doing my 6-kilometre circuit. As I said last week, these two videos go together, following through on the same theme. I spoke last week about the types of experiences that become the vehicles from which shame works into our life, and then of course I said that love was the answer to that. Of course I've said that before, and way back in the beginning of this journey I talked about the 5 pieces of love. I just wanted to make the connection in this video with that process. So those 5 pieces of love are trust, safety, vulnerability, affirmation, and belonging. So when I say those are the pieces of love, those are the things that we are looking for when we are desiring to be loved. And those are the things that we need to give if we are wanting to love somebody. Very often we will be confusing the emotional response to love with love itself. And of course our emotions are a very important part of it, but they aren't the love itself. Love delivers those components, those 5 components, to another, and they are what we are seeking when we look for love. Trust, safety, vulnerability, affirmation, and belonging, or belonging and affirmation. You can put those in either order. Those beautiful whipbirds. This is actually just a gorgeous walk. So what is it about those things that is so important? Remember that in wrestling with shame, or trying to come to grips with shame, we've identified, or we recognized, that shame is fundamentally an identity issue. It delivers a sense of worthlessness and accompanying phenomena, loneliness, emptiness, lostness. Those kinds of things are all different parts of that feeling, those feelings of worthlessness. And of course, from the beginning, made the claim that love and worth are 2 sides of the same coin. The mechanism by which we love another, or we receive love, is that mechanism of worth. And that's where those 5 pieces come in. If you take those pieces out, you stop communicating worth. Obviously nothing is in this equation black and white. There's varying degrees, but for simplicity, let's just say that I was wanting to communicate to somebody that I loved them, and I made them relatively safe. I acted in a trustworthy way, but I never allowed them to feel like they belonged with me. Of course that will impact the other things. It will impact safety, it will impact trust. But again, just for simplicity, just so that, let's just say that I was able to deliver those other things, but in any context where I was in relationship with that person, I caused them to feel like they didn't belong. They would immediately doubt that I loved them. because that communication of not belonging goes straight to that place of shame. It's the same thing as with the failure that I spoke about last week. It becomes the vehicle upon which shame rides. So in thinking about shame as an identity issue, it's about who I am. They accompany ideas. I am worthless. I am a failure. I am not good enough. I can't do it, whatever it might be. Those kinds of ideas are the shame ideas. They are identity ideas. They are I am constructs. Well, those 5 pieces, each of them are communicating something about a person's identity in a positive way. When I make a person feel safe, my video on that I talked about identity safety. When I make a person feel safe in terms of their identity, I'm saying to them, you are so valuable to me that I am not going to challenge how you've constructed your identity. If the way that you've constructed your identity needs to change, then that change will occur as we journey together through life. So the idea of safety then communicates something to the person's identity. To act in a trustworthy way, to communicate trust, or to say to someone, I trust you, says to them that I value your desire, your heart. It's not about that I trust that you won't get wrong, or even that I trust that you won't hurt me. What I trust is your heart. I know that I trust your desire in terms of the way you relate to me. So that says something to you about how I value you. If I'm vulnerable, then I am saying, well, it's part of the trust, isn't it? It's saying I trust you, it's saying I feel safe. But vulnerability says I'm going to expose who I really am to you in order to communicate how valuable you are to me. Vulnerability is, for most of us, if not all of us, one of the hardest things to get our minds around, precisely because of shame. And even when we've dealt with so much of this process, we'll still often have little mechanisms that keep part of who we are hidden. And primarily that's because we don't want to be hurt, because if we get hurt, that will speak to us about our worth. But vulnerability, letting another person see who I really am, is one of the most crucial pieces of love. Affirmation, just the communication of worth. If I say to a person constantly, boy, you didn't do a very good job there, it's going to attach. That's that failure thing. That's going to be a communication about their performance, saying you're inadequate. But if I'm always finding a way of affirming the fundamental person, even when they fail, then what I'm doing is saying, you're valuable to me. And I'm reaffirming, or I'm using the same word twice, I am establishing their identity as something of worth. And then, of course, belonging, which I've already touched on a little bit. But to say to a person, you don't belong, is immediately received as a worth statement. To fail to recognize that when we reject a person, when we hold them at arm's length, when we keep distance between ourselves and them, whether it be emotionally or physically, does say that you're not valuable to me. So each of those 5 things working in concert together becomes the vehicle through which love is effectively communicated. And it's what we long for, and it's what we need to be giving others. And once again, and this is where all of this leads to, those 5 things are what we receive from God. When we allow God's love to work in our lives, that is what we receive. There is no better picture of the church than the space where those 5 things operate. I think it's fair to say that the church has failed many times over, countless ways, down through the last 2,000 years to effectively deliver those things. So much so that for many people they would never associate those things with the church. And the church genuinely needs to change and address that. But that is precisely what the church is supposed to be. And as a Christian, that's the part of the church, that's the church that I want to be a part of. I don't have a lot of time for churches that cannot and do not communicate those things. And when I say I don't have a lot of time for them, I mean I don't want to spend a lot of time in that kind of a place. I want to find a place that loves me in those ways and that I can love in that way as well. And that is the final piece of the puzzle. Allowing ourselves to be loved brings with it a consequence of loving in that same way. And that's the transformation that love brings. And every step along that way is a step in the deliverance from shame. So, not exactly sure how far along this track I am, and I have come to the end of what I want to say about love and shame, but I will video the last few meters of this journey just so that you know that I've completed it. As I'm walking, I'm not sure how much further I have, but I assume it's probably about another, maybe an hour. And for you, that will jump very quickly. But for me, there's a fair bit of work to go. So anyway, shame and love are opposites of the spectrum. Love is the effective response to shame. And ultimately, love must come from the source of love. And true love, that which has all of those 5 pieces, whether we're aware of it or not, does flow from the heart of the one that is love. Well, thanks for taking this journey with me, and I shall see you next week. Between now and then, keep walking in your garden. Listen to those birds.